Hello, Facebook viewers. Welcome to another edition of CHP Talks. I'm here today with CHP Leader Rod Taylor and a candidate from the 2019 election, Jenny Johnson. We're going to be talking about a rural perspective on COVID-19 and Canadian politics in general. So I hope that you'll join the conversation and take time to watch.
Yes, hello, and thank you, Peter, for the introduction, and thank you, Jenny, for joining us today. We also want to thank you for being a candidate for the Christian Heritage Party in 2019, representing life, family, and freedom in Dauphin Swan River riding of Manitoba. And we're speaking to Jenny today. She's in Roblin. I'm in northern British Columbia, and Peter's in Ontario. So we've got the country covered. So thank you, Jenny, for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Yes, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here today.
So Jenny, you ran as a candidate. What got you interested in CHP, and when did you decide to become a candidate?
Well, it was a few years in the making, really. But I think, as it is for a lot of people who are involved in this party, it came down to the issue of life, knowing that it's a gift from God and it's something worth cherishing and protecting. I've always been interested in politics. I've enjoyed the conversations that arise around it, but I've been hesitant to be involved on a matter of principle, on a matter of being a part of something. If it doesn't stand for and cherish life, then I can't just throw myself into it. So when I met Rod in Edmonton, he was definitely a part of that journey. And having that conversation with him kind of was that last push I needed to really follow after his example. In some ways, I really admired the stance that he's taken and what he's decided to do with his life. And I thought, if he can do it, so can I.
Well, we're so glad that you did jump in. It was great to meet you at the one conference, and then again this year. Saw you after the election. I guess the one conference has been canceled for next year because of COVID. So
Right.
We'll count that as a great one-off that we were able to meet there amidst so many Christians coming together to get encouraged and strengthened.
Yeah.
So, Peter, you have another follow-up question you wanted to ask.
Well, yeah, you just mentioned COVID-19, and there's so many parts of the country are affected in different ways. Both of you live in more rural communities, a little bit more remote. How is it affecting you up there? How do you see the whole pandemic and the various reactions to it that have been taken?
Am I going first?
Sure, yeah.
Sure. Well, it's surreal, really, the way that it has so quickly changed everything here in our small town and in what can feel like the middle of nowhere. I think perhaps we as a small community were affected a little later than some of the more populated areas in Canada, but from what I can see, in many ways, we are just as affected. Maybe it was a little later, but businesses have closed, the schools have closed, churches aren't meeting. It's surreal to me. I know I'm young, but I've definitely never seen anything like this or heard of anything like this before.
How fast it has affected the way people think, and what the kind of restrictions on our freedoms that we're willing to accept because of the widespread calamity.
Yeah.
I know here people are looking for ways. Obviously, we're using Zoom more or various forms of telecommunications, video conferencing, and so on. And even in Smithers, we had a parking lot church last week. Everyone they were gathered. Even the cars were socially distanced from one another, and we were listening to the message on our car radio. So at least you were in the presence of friends, and you sort of knew that you were gathered together to celebrate God's great message of salvation. but it's certainly different. And I heard today that Anthony Fauci says, well, never go back to shaking hands again. Well, that would, to me, that would be a terrible tragedy if we don't resume some of the more friendly aspects of our society. Now, here in the northern British Columbia, we're still able to purchase groceries and things like that. People are still able to walk their dogs and get out in the fresh air, separated from one another. So we're trying to make the best of it that we can.
Anything more on that's particular that you've noticed from northern Manitoba on this?
Well, I have a feeling it's pretty similar everywhere else, but what I've marveled at the most is the effect that social media has had upon these events. And I find it really difficult to distinguish between what are official government regulations and recommendations and what is just social pressure and shaming, and suddenly there's, experts who aren't experts at all, telling me that I shouldn't be out going for a walk or what's considered essential and what isn't. And I'm getting, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I'm getting mixed messages if I'm ever on social media as to what I'm allowed to do and what I'm discouraged from doing. And it's sad to me because I think, at least here in our small town, the speed with which businesses were closing down operations and changing the way they were doing things, and it was way before even our province had declared a state of emergency. Our schools hadn't even closed, and yet businesses were taking drastic measures, and then people were applauding those measures. And it just seemed to me that it was more of a result of social pressure rather than, evidential or scientific recommendations. And it's kind of scary to watch.
Yeah, the long-term effects on businesses will be telling, and that will be, I've said it before and I might write about it in the future, but I think it's easier to sort of freeze an economy than it is to thaw it back out again, get it working again.
Sure, and then you add the $107 billion, which is probably not the last dollar that's going to be spent on this in Canada. Reduced revenue from taxation and so on, additional needs. Our economy is, if it recovers at all, we believe it will come back to an extent. It'll probably be a long time before it reaches the level it was at before this broke out, and our kids and grandchildren will be paying the piper for a long time. What I'm a little bit afraid of is that the current government, Justin Trudeau and Mr. Morneau, will sort of blame the COVID crisis for our fiscal state, and really they were well on the way to spending our grandchildren's money, before the COVID crisis hit. So this is just one more blow to our fiscal solvency.
Right.
But
I think for someone like me, I've never considered myself an expert when it comes to the economy or just the sort of underlying foundation that our country operates on. I think this is going to be a bit of a crash course for me and a lot of people like me to see how important our economy really is, and just the day-to-day business and things that up till now we have taken for granted. How that's what it's the success of our country is built on that. And this might be a wake-up call in the worst of ways, perhaps, as far as what really is important to a country functioning in freedom and independence. This might be an unfortunate way to learn just how important those things are.
Yeah, and it takes us, I think, to a deeper level at that point too, right? Where you've got the surface of people not being able to shake hands, but then, what connections, what friendships, survive a time like this? What really is at our core, right?
Right.
So, and I think the earlier generations had, a couple of world wars in some cases that they lived through and had even greater social disruption and really had to find out what survived, right? But our generation had had nothing like that.
Yeah.
And of course, underlying it are the philosophical assumptions of, both our government and people who think like we do. And so the government says we're going to keep on doing abortions, for instance,
Right.
Ignoring every aspect of social distancing.
Right.
But it's so philosophically important to this government that they forge ahead, as if there's no tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And they have other things on their agenda, the euthanasia extension, banning conversion therapy, what they consider conversion therapy, which is basically Christian counseling for those who want to change their lifestyle and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So on those topics, Jenny, as a candidate last year in northern or rural Manitoba, what was the response to our policies and our philosophy regarding the sanctity of life, the strength of traditional family values, and so on?
Both privately and publicly, I never came up against any opposition whatsoever. The other candidates, in the conversations I had with them, in any of the constituents or just friends or family or acquaintances in town that I talked with, the message that I was trying to speak was really well received. It really was. And I even felt the other candidates, they had a chance to speak privately with me and disagree with me, and they didn't. They only encouraged me. It just seemed that as far as they were concerned, the candidates, they couldn't. It felt that it felt to me they liked what I was saying, but they couldn't publicly agree with me. But what I'm trying to say is the lack of opposition actually surprised me. But then what discouraged me in the end was, and maybe this is a rural thing, but maybe this is just a nationwide thing, people are just pretty stuck with the kind of the way they've always done things, the party that they've always voted for. And at least the way it was here in our riding, it was much more, you just vote for the party and you vote for the most strategic vote to make sure whoever it is that you don't want to get in doesn't get in, or that it was much more the party over the person. And even the platform, even the message seemed to be less important than just the overall sort of strategic vote of, when it came up to the leaders of the party. And it was frustrating because it almost felt like I could say anything, or the Liberal candidate could say anything or not say anything at all. And it felt like it didn't matter just so much.
Mm. So even out in the rural areas, you're getting that sort of national perspective overriding the individual candidates. Yeah, and that is a shame. Exactly. Because you're represented by your local MP.
It's really difficult. Canadians have yet, as a country, we have yet to accept the idea that you could vote for someone whose party is not well known, right. And that person could be the best representative in your district. Right. But people do fall in, and I think the media has a lot to do with it. CBC and CTV and whatever, they talk about the so-called the big 3 or 4 parties, and they ignore the smaller parties, and people tend to think, well, those are the only choices I have, the only real choices. So it is too bad, because I know many people have wanted to support us, but when they walk into the polling booth, they feel they have to fall in line with what the polls that they've seen or whatever. And even if they're voting strategically, many of them do not get what they strategically want. If they think they want, well, we'd rather have a conservative government, but in this district, a vote for the Conservative did not get them what they want. We got the NDP back, which is, of course, from our perspective, a terrible choice to make.
Yeah. Well, do either of you have a sort of a final thought, something that you want to leave with our viewers in this time of isolation, or maybe a call to action?
Well, if there was one thing I could say, and we've touched on it a couple times, how the media, whether it's social media or our national media, I'm just not sure it's doing us a whole lot of favors right now. I love the fact that we can use technology to talk like this, and so there's some good that our technology and the internet can bring, but in a time like this when things are just honestly kind of crazy right now, if I could say one thing, I'd say let's just open our Bibles. Let's turn off the news and turn off Facebook and open our Bibles. It's such a relevant book, and I think it has a lot to say about seasons like this.
Yeah. Well, God has answers for all our questions if we'll only ask him. And again, I want to thank you so much for running for us in Dauphin Swan River. And you've set a great example for other Christians living in rural areas and in the cities, of course, across the country, to be able to represent life, family, and freedom, to have a place on the ballot, give people an opportunity to vote for the things they believe in. And, the more candidates we have, the better known our party will become. And one day, in God's timing, we will have representation in the House of Commons. And I think that will be a monumental shift for our nation.
Well, thank you both for your thoughts, for this good conversation. And thank you, all of you who are watching on Facebook. We hope that you'll join us again next week when we try to do another CHP Talks. God bless you all.